It was early evening, and I was standing on a step stool in my living room, untangling a string of white Christmas lights that refused to cooperate. The window was cracked open, letting in the cool December air, and the house smelled faintly of cinnamon from a candle I'd lit earlier. My daughter was on the floor nearby, coloring quietly, her legs folded under her like she always did when she was focused. That's when my phone lit up on the coffee table. I almost ignored it. I assumed it was another delivery update or a client email. Instead, it was a message from my mother. The words were short, clean, sharp. She wrote that only well-behaved children were welcome at the family Christmas this year, that if I still planned to come, I should come alone, and that my daughter didn't need to be there. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there on the stool, one hand gripping the lights, the other resting against the wall to steady myself. Behind me, I felt movement. My daughter had stood up. She didn't say anything. She just looked at my phone, then at me. Her face was still, but her hands had curled inward, the way they always did when she was trying not to cry. I climbed down slowly and sat beside her. The room felt very quiet all of a sudden. I could hear the low hum of the heater kicking on, the distant sound of a car passing outside. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice even. I didn't explain. I didn't defend anyone. I just pulled her close. She nodded once and wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, like she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I typed a reply to my mother with steady fingers, just one word. Understood. Then I put the phone face down. At the time, what my parents didn't know was that every single part of their Christmas was already in motion. The food, the decorations, the gifts, all of it had been arranged weeks earlier. Paid for quietly, like it always was, and there was one confirmation email sitting unopened in my inbox. I didn't touch it yet. My daughter curled up beside me on the couch, her head resting against my arm. I could feel her breathing slow as she tried to settle herself. I stared at the blank television screen and let the moment pass without filling it with words. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, not even close. From the outside, my family probably looked normal, stable. Holidays at my parents' house outside Albuquerque. Long tables, loud conversations, too much food. But inside that picture, there had always been a quiet hierarchy. My sister's kids were the center of everything. Their drawings went on the fridge. Their stories were repeated at dinner. Their schedules shaped the plans. My daughter learned early how to stay small. When she was 5, she once brought my mother a handmade card she'd spent the entire afternoon on. Glitter everywhere, bent corners. She held it out with both hands. My mom smiled, glanced at it, and set it on the counter without reading it. Then she turned back to talking about my nephew's soccer game. No one said anything. So neither did I. I told myself it was easier to absorb it quietly than to turn every gathering into a confrontation. I told myself that consistency mattered more than fairness, that showing up was still better than not showing up at all. And for years, I made that choice. I paid for holiday meals. I ordered gifts for everyone so nothing would feel awkward. I handled logistics so no one had to worry. I thought maybe, over time, things would soften. Sitting there on the couch that night, my daughter finally asleep against me, I picked up my phone again. There was a new email at the top of my inbox. It was from the retailer handling the Christmas deliveries. I didn't open it yet. I just stared at the screen, listening to the quiet, and let myself think for the first time that maybe silence didn't have to mean acceptance. Then I waited. I didn't open the email right away. I set my phone back down and sat there a little longer, letting the quiet settle back into the room. The tree lights weren't even up yet. Just a small box of ornaments on the rug, an extension cord, and that stubborn strand of white bulbs coiled like a knot I didn't feel like fighting. My daughter slept with her cheek pressed into my sleeve. Every so often, she made a soft sound in her throat, like she was dreaming and didn't want to be alone inside it. I stayed still until she shifted on her own. Then I carried her to bed. Her room was simple. A nightlight shaped like a moon, a pile of library books by the dresser, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked against the pillow like it was waiting for her. When I laid her down, she reached for the rabbit without waking, fingers closing around the ear. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the doorframe, watching her breathing even out. Then I went back to the living room, sat on the couch, and opened my phone again. The email was exactly what I expected. Order confirmation, multiple deliveries, multiple addresses, scheduled for the next morning and the day after. It listed everything I'd bought for my family: clothes for my sister's kids, a smartwatch my dad had mentioned casually in October, perfume for my mom, a couple toys I'd picked after scrolling reviews late at night. It looked tidy on the screen, organized, responsible. It also looked like a mistake I'd been repeating for years. I'm 36 now. I've been raising my daughter alone since she was a toddler. Not because I wanted a medal for it, and not because I think it makes me special. It's just the truth. Her dad disappeared early, and I stopped expecting anyone to fill that gap. I built my life around what I could do myself: steady work, a small apartment, routines that held us together. But the one place I kept trying to earn my way in was my own family. My sister Erin never had to earn anything. She married young, her husband had a solid job, and they moved into a house that my parents helped them buy. Their kids were always dressed perfectly, always signed up for the right activities, always the ones my parents bragged about. My daughter was the one who got described in softer language, the one my mother spoke about like she was a footnote. When she was little, I used to tell myself my parents just didn't know how to connect with her, that it would change as she got older, that maybe once she talked more, once she could tell jokes, once she could fit in, they'd warm up. But it didn't work that way. I can still picture a summer cookout a few years back. The smell of charcoal, the buzzing sound of cicadas in the trees, paper plates stacked on the counter. My dad was outside laughing with my nephew, lifting him onto his shoulders like it was nothing. My daughter stood near the porch steps, holding a plastic cup with a lid, waiting politely for her turn to be noticed. She tugged my dad's shirt and said, "Grandpa, look!" He didn't look. He just said, "Hang on," without turning. She waited anyway. That was the part that got me. She kept waiting, like the patience itself might earn her a response. That night, when we drove home, she stared out the window and asked me, "Did I do something wrong?" I told her no. I told her they were just distracted. And every time I said it, it tasted like something I didn't want in my mouth. Over the years, the pattern stayed the same. At holidays, my parents had the camera out constantly, but somehow my daughter ended up off to the side. In group photos, she'd be the one half-cropped or standing behind someone taller. When my mom posted the pictures later, my daughter was often missing altogether, like she hadn't been there. I noticed. I always noticed. I also kept paying. I paid for the big dinners because my mother couldn't manage it this year. I ordered catered trays when my parents said they were overwhelmed. I bought gifts because my sister would text me vague reminders. "Don't forget the kids like Minecraft now," or "Dad mentioned he needs a new watch." And because I didn't want my daughter to feel like we didn't belong, I made sure we arrived with full hands. Food, presents, wrapped boxes stacked in the car like proof we deserved a seat at the table. Last year alone, I spent just over $3,000 on that holiday. I know because I track everything. I do freelance design work, and if you don't watch the numbers eat you. I remember standing in my kitchen back then, checking receipts while mashed potatoes boiled over, thinking, this has to help. Like love was a problem that could be solved by covering the cost. And now here I was again, staring at an email full of proof. My mother had told me my daughter wasn't welcome, and my first instinct, before the anger, before the sadness, was to do what I always did. Fix it. Smooth it over. Keep things moving so no one else would be uncomfortable. I stared at the screen until my eyes felt dry. Then I scrolled down to the bottom of the email where the cancellation options were listed in plain text. 1 click for each order. I didn't click anything yet. Instead, I put the phone down again and walked into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. The faucet ran cold. The glass fogged slightly in my hand. I drank slowly, standing there under the soft light above the sink, letting my thoughts line up one by one. Because by the time my mother sent that message, the problem wasn't just that she'd been cruel. It was that she'd finally said the quiet part out loud. And now I had to decide what I was going to do with that. I went back to the couch, picked up my phone again, and rested my thumb on the first cancellation button. Then I paused. I didn't rush it. I never do when something actually matters. I sat there with my thumb hovering, reading the order details one last time. Dates, addresses, item lists, everything neatly organized, like a small system that only worked because I kept feeding it. Then I started canceling, one order at a time. No sweeping gesture, no dramatic motion, just a series of quiet confirmations. The app asked if I was sure. I selected yes. It warned me about delays and refunds. I accepted. Each screen refreshed, lighter than the last. When I finished, the total balance dropped to 0. A confirmation email arrived almost immediately. Subject line simple, professional, final. I locked my phone and set it on the table. Nothing in the room changed. The couch didn't shift. The lights stayed tangled. The heater hummed the same as before. That's the thing about decisions like that. From the outside, they don't announce themselves. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. I watched it vibrate against the wood for a few seconds before picking it up. Unknown number. Hello? Hi, a man said, calm and polite. I'm calling to confirm a cancellation request. We had several deliveries scheduled today for the same family name. Yes, I said. That was me. There was a brief pause, just long enough for him to check his screen. All of them? Yes, I said again. All of them. All right, he replied. Just wanted to be sure. Have a good evening. You too. I ended the call and set the phone face down. That was it. No confrontation. No raised voices. Just a process completed correctly. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel excited. Mostly, I felt still. That night, my daughter and I ate leftovers and watched a movie we'd already seen twice. She laughed at the same parts she always laughed at. I noticed she leaned closer to me than usual, like she was checking whether I was really there. Before bed, she asked quietly, "Are we going to Grandma's?" I shook my head. Not this year. She nodded once. No questions, no tears. Just a small exhale, like she'd been holding something in. The next morning, while I was rinsing a mug in the sink, my phone started buzzing on the counter. I didn't answer it. A text followed, then another. I dried my hands slowly and glanced at the screen. It was my sister. "Did you cancel the orders? The delivery didn't come. The kids are asking where the gifts are." I didn't reply. Another message appeared, this one from my mother. No greeting, just a photo. Their living room. Long table set. Decorations up. Everyone gathered like usual. The caption read, "Waiting on the last pieces." I noticed what wasn't in the frame. No boxes. No bags. No wrapped corners peeking out from under the tree. I set the phone down and went back to making breakfast. My daughter sat at the table eating cereal, swinging her feet slightly, humming to herself. Sunlight came through the window at an angle that made the dust in the air visible if you looked closely. A few minutes later, another text came through. This time from my sister again. Seriously, what happened? Then my mom. Call me. I didn't. Silence, I was learning, was not the absence of action. It was the action. By mid-morning, the calls started coming faster. Missed call. Voicemail. Another missed call. I let them stack up without listening to any of them. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I wasn't proving a point. I was observing. I wanted to see what happened when I stopped stepping in. That afternoon, my daughter and I baked cookies. Flour on the counter, chocolate chips disappearing faster than they should. She laughed when I pretended not to notice. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification from my sister. I didn't play it. I didn't need to. I already knew the tone. Confused first, then irritated, then accusatory. By evening, a new message came in from my mother. "We need to talk. There's something going on with the house." I stared at that line longer than the others. I hadn't heard anything about a problem with their house before. Not once. Not in passing. Not in complaint. I picked up the phone, opened the message, and read it again carefully. Then I set the phone down and didn't respond. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. The Christmas issue wasn't the real issue. It was just the first thing that stopped working. And whatever they were about to tell me next, I wanted to hear it when I was ready. So I waited. I didn't respond that night, or the next morning. Instead, I went back to work. I answered client emails. I adjusted a layout that had been bothering me for weeks. I took my daughter to school, listened to her talk about a science project, and watched her disappear through the doors with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Life stayed steady because I kept it that way. By the third day, the messages had changed tone. The irritation was gone. What replaced it was urgency, loosely disguised as concern. My mother left a voicemail saying they were just dealing with something small. My sister texted that my parents were stressed and that it would mean a lot if I could call. I didn't. I've learned over the years that when people say something is small, it usually means they don't want to explain it yet. That afternoon when I got home, there was an envelope sticking out of my mailbox that didn't belong to me. The address was my parents'. Same handwriting as always. Same bank logo in the corner. It had been delivered to my unit by mistake. I stood there for a moment with the envelope in my hand, weighing it. Then I unlocked the door, went inside, and set it on the kitchen table. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, let the kettle boil, poured the water slowly, sat down. Only then did I slide a finger under the flap. Inside were loan documents, multiple pages, numbers highlighted, payment history listed in neat columns. The amount was larger than I expected. $52,000. The purpose line referenced my sister's business, a boutique she'd opened 2 years earlier, the same one my parents bragged about to friends but never mentioned needing help. What caught my eye wasn't the total. It was the red notice stamped near the top. Past due. I flipped through the pages carefully. 6 months of missed payments. Late fees accumulating. A notice stating that if the balance wasn't brought current, foreclosure proceedings would begin. The collateral listed was my parents' house. I sat there a long time, reading and rereading the same lines. It explained a lot. The sudden warmth in my mother's voice the week before. The way my sister had avoided specifics. The urgency that had replaced their irritation once the gifts didn't arrive. They weren't calling because they missed us. They were calling because the system they relied on had stalled. My phone buzzed again, right on cue. This time, I answered. "Hey," my sister said quickly. "Did you get Mom's messages?" "I did," I replied. There was a pause. "So, you know things are a little tight right now." "I know," I said. She exhaled audibly, like she was relieved I hadn't pushed back. "We just need some help getting through this part. You've always been good at handling stuff like this." I looked down at the paperwork spread across my table. Dates, signatures, my parents' names signed cleanly at the bottom. "How much do you need?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "Not everything," she said carefully. "Just enough to catch them up." I didn't respond. She filled the silence quickly. "Once the store picks up again, it'll be fine. This was just a rough patch." I ended the call a few minutes later without agreeing to anything. That night, after my daughter went to bed, I sat at my laptop and reviewed my savings. I knew exactly what I had. I track everything. Emergency fund, taxes, college account. I could cover part of it. Not all. But enough to stop the immediate threat. The question wasn't whether I could. It was whether I should. I thought about my daughter sitting alone at that birthday party months earlier, holding a gift no one acknowledged. I thought about the message my mother had sent, written without hesitation. Unwanted. I thought about how quickly the conversation shifted once the gifts disappeared. By morning, I had a plan. Step 1, handle the immediate risk. Step 2, observe what changed. Step 3, decide what boundaries actually meant. I made the transfer directly to the bank. Not to my parents, not to my sister. Straight to the account listed on the notice. $10,000, enough to pause the process. I saved the confirmation. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't call anyone. I didn't announce it. I waited. A week later, my mother called again. Her voice was noticeably warmer. "We're having a birthday gathering for your nephew," she said. "You should bring your daughter. It would be nice." I hesitated, just long enough to notice my daughter watching me from across the room. "Okay," I said. I told myself this wasn't forgiveness. It was information. I needed to see what $10,000 actually bought. So we went, and I paid attention to everything. We pulled into my parents' driveway under a clear afternoon sky. Balloons were tied to the fence. Music played softly from inside. My daughter climbed out of the car, holding a small gift she'd made herself, a painted stone with a smile on it. She looked up at me and smiled. I took her hand, and we walked toward the door. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment that would make the decision permanent. The party was already loud when we walked in. Kids running through the hallway, music playing just a little too loud, the smell of grilled food drifting in from the backyard. My parents greeted us briefly, then turned back to the other guests. My sister was near the kitchen island, directing her kids with one hand while scrolling her phone with the other. My daughter stood close to me, clutching the small wrapped box in both hands. "Can I give him this now?" she asked. "In a minute," I said quietly. We waited. Gifts were opened in a cluster near the living room. Store-bought boxes, bright wrapping paper, loud reactions. My nephew tore through everything quickly, barely looking up. My daughter stepped forward once, then stopped when no one noticed her. She held the gift against her chest and stepped back. I watched without intervening, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to see it clearly, without excuses. Outside, the kids moved to the bounce house. My dad stood by the grill laughing with my brother-in-law. My mom hovered around my sister's children, fixing collars, wiping faces. My daughter sat on a bench near the patio, swinging her legs slowly. The painted rock rested in her lap. I started toward her when I heard my mother's voice behind me. Low, casual. "She's not really our grandchild," she said to my sister. "Not like yours." My sister nodded, eyes still on her phone. There was no anger in the words, no malice, just certainty. I stopped walking. My daughter didn't look up, but I saw her shoulders tense. She'd heard it. That was the moment the math finished itself in my head. I walked over and knelt beside her. "Ready to go home?" I asked softly. She nodded immediately. We left without explaining. No goodbyes, no scene. The car ride home was quiet. The gift stayed unopened on the seat between us. Later that night, after my daughter was asleep, I opened my laptop again. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I pulled up my bank history and loan confirmations and reviewed everything carefully. The $10,000, the dates, the notices I'd saved. I also checked my messages. There were new ones already. From my mother, from my sister. They thanked me. Not for coming, not for my daughter's patience, for helping with the house. That was when I understood something very clearly. Nothing I did for them changed how they saw my child. It only changed how comfortable they felt asking for more. The next morning, I blocked their numbers. All of them. I didn't announce it, I didn't explain it. I just removed the access. That afternoon, I met a close friend for coffee, someone who had known me long enough to see the pattern without needing details. She listened. Then she said, "You already did more than enough. Now you're done." I nodded. A few days later, another envelope arrived, this one thicker. Same bank, different loan. I sat at the table and opened it carefully. $75,000. Second lien, same collateral, further delinquent. I didn't feel surprised. I felt finished. Because this one hadn't been mentioned at all. They hadn't forgotten. They'd hidden it. And that made the next step simple. I placed all the paperwork into a single folder. Neat. Labeled. Then I waited. Because this time, I wasn't going to rescue anyone. I was going to tell the truth. And then, I was going to stop. They came to my place a week later. No warning, no call. Just my parents standing outside my door in the late afternoon. My mother clutching a folder like it might dissolve if she let go. My dad stood slightly behind her, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the concrete. My daughter was still at school. I was grateful for that. I let them in and gestured toward the kitchen table. We sat. The folder stayed between us, unopened, like they expected me to reach for it. I didn't. My mother spoke first. "The bank scheduled the auction," she said. Her voice trembled, but not with apology, with fear. "We need help again." I nodded once. "I know." My dad looked up. "You do?" I reached into the cabinet beside me and pulled out my own folder, the one I'd prepared. I placed it on the table and slid it forward. "This is the second loan," I said calmly. $75,000, 8 months delinquent, same house used as collateral. My mother's face went pale. "You weren't going to tell me," I continued. "Not when I sent the first payment. Not when you invited us to the party. Not when you thanked me." Silence filled the kitchen. My dad cleared his throat. "We thought we could fix it." "You thought I would," I said. My mother started to cry then. Not loudly, just quietly, like something leaking. "We're family," she said. "We made mistakes." I folded my hands on the table. "You did," repeatedly. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. "You've ignored my daughter for years," I said. "You said she wasn't really your grandchild. You sent a message telling me she wasn't welcome, and you expected me to keep paying?" My dad finally spoke. "We didn't mean for her to hear that. That doesn't change that she did." No one argued after that. I explained, slowly and clearly, what was going to happen next. I would not be paying this loan. I would not be co-signing anything. I would not be involved in negotiations with the bank. They could sell the house themselves or let the process continue. That was their decision. But it would be theirs alone. My mother shook her head. "If we lose the house, you already did," I said gently. "You just haven't packed yet." That was the end of the conversation. They left without raising their voices, without accusations, without promises. 2 weeks later, the house went to auction. My sister took them in. A small apartment, temporary, she said, that I knew better. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel guilt. I felt finished. The messages came for a few days after that. From new numbers. From email addresses I didn't recognize. I didn't open them. Because resolution doesn't come from explaining yourself one last time. It comes from stopping. And that part was already done. I put the folder into a storage box, labeled it clearly, and slid it onto a shelf in the closet. Then I closed the door, and I didn't look back. Life got quieter after that. Not empty, just orderly. A few weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, I stood in the kitchen wiping down the counters while my daughter sat at the table working on a puzzle. The window was open, letting in cool air, and the sound of someone mowing a lawn drifted in from down the block. Nothing urgent, nothing unresolved. That was new. We developed small routines that belonged only to us. Friday movie nights, Saturday mornings at the library, simple dinners we cooked together without rushing. No checking my phone to see if someone needed something, no bracing myself for the next request disguised as family concern. One evening, as we were folding laundry, my daughter looked up at me and said, "It's nicer when it's just us." I nodded. I think so too. She didn't ask about her grandparents anymore. Not because she forgot, but because the absence no longer felt confusing. Children understand stability faster than adults do. Sometimes I'd hear updates through mutual acquaintances. My parents still talked about how everything got out of hand. My sister still framed things as unfortunate timing. No one ever mentioned my daughter. That told me everything I needed to know. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't chase closure. I reorganized my files. I closed old accounts. I redirected money into savings and her future instead of emergencies that weren't mine. One afternoon, while helping a neighbor review paperwork for a housing dispute, I noticed the same familiar pattern. Vague explanations, emotional pressure, urgency without transparency. I helped her step through it calmly, document by document, rule by rule. She thanked me afterward and said, "I didn't realize I was allowed to stop." That stayed with me, because sometimes people don't need rescuing. They need permission to choose peace. That's what I gave myself, and that's what I'll keep giving my daughter. If you've been listening quietly and this story felt familiar, you're not alone. These situations show up in different forms, different families, different houses, but the patterns repeat. If this resonated with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps this channel reach people who might need to hear stories like this. And if you're comfortable, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read more of them than you might think. 2 more popular stories will be playing next. One's about quiet boundaries and the moment someone finally stops paying for other people's chaos. Take care of yourself.